North Carolina Central versus Elon is our game of the week. And can the Eagles pull off a big time FCS victory for yet another season? Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, aka the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Man, it's the game of the week time for us. And we're all about North Carolina Central versus Elon. We have three matchups, two storylines, and one key to victory. Obviously, we will not give a key for Elon because Elon is not an HBCU, and this is Locked On HBCU. Right? Surprise, surprise. But we're going to focus on North Carolina Central because I think that the Eagles are looking to do something huge here. And we'll get into that in segment 2 when we get into our storylines. However, our top matchup to watch in this game is Jamari Taylor versus the Elon front seven. I think it's very self-explanatory. If you watched last week's game between North Carolina Central and Alabama State, I think it's very self-explanatory why Jamari Taylor is the first person that you want to bring up. He was the MVP. Matter of fact, let's flash this graphic one more time. And next week, I plan on doing some graphics for this show specifically. But for right now, this is our recap. 24 carries, 128 yards, 3 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground, and 1 through the air. Jamari Taylor was a beast against Alabama State. So it's only right that we sit here and we wonder, will he be beast-like in this next game against Elon? It's a big deal. However, I want to look at the other side of it because Jamari Taylor versus the Elon front seven. Why am I specifying this? What made this even bigger? What made this the premier matchup in a couple of matchups that I think are pretty important and pretty cool, to be honest? I really like the matchups that we've crafted for today's episode. But what made this special is the fact that Elon had a really good or did a really good job stopping the run against Duke, an FBS opponent. Now, a lot of times we talk about having to take FBS versus FCS matchups with a grain of salt, but that's because of lower performance. That's not because of excelling. If somebody excels against an FBS opponent and you're an FCS school, well, now we're not taking it with a grain of salt. We're magnifying it because we're assuming that when you come down to another subdivision, the one that you're currently at, because you're not playing up, then you'll be playing right there with your competition. That will either continue or even amplify as the season goes on. So when I see Elon's front seven, when I see the run defense, period, because that's an 11-man effort, but we're looking at the front seven today. When I look at them and they hold Duke to 59 yards on 27 carries, that's a decent amount of carries. To only have 59 yards that's impressive. That means that they were doing their job on a consistent basis, getting in the backfield, forcing short runs, forcing tackles for a loss. Like, this was a really good job by the Elon trenches, especially when you think about the fact that we talk about the trenches being the difference between FCS and FBS. So if the trenches are typically the difference, and Elon did a good job winning the trenches on the defensive side of the ball, now what do you take from that? Because to me, that means that they're a force to be reckoned with. That's what I think, at least. So that's what I'm going to deliver to you. Let's look at these guys. And it's not a lot of scrambling. There's no Malik Murphy was the starting quarterback for Duke. There's no yardage for him on the run side. He wasn't sacked any, so you don't have to worry about sack yardage taking away. You don't have to worry about scrambling and trying to figure out, was it a designed run? Was it a Was it a scramble on what was supposed to be a pass play? All of those are different type of rushing yards. They don't always reflect your run defense. Sometimes the quarterback scramble is more so of your pass defense and what you're doing in your secondary and how you're playing. There's a lot of things that go into it. But when I only got running backs on here, I ain't got nothing to worry about. They have one team rush for -3 yards. This is obviously a premiere, so we're going to take most of the time talking about it. But these are pure rushing yards. Even if you took that little -3 that we're talking about, take it away, make it 26 for 62. You're still not hitting 3 a pop. Pure rushing yards. Let's look at the 3 running backs who had carries for Duke. Duke had a running back who went 10 carries, 2.4 yards per carry. 13 carries, 1.8 yards per carry. 3 carries, 5 yards per carry. And that included a 9-yard run. So it's not as if we're really seeing consistent displays here. Even the player who had 13 carries, he had 1.8 yards per carry. But guess what? He had a 12-yard run. The longest rush that Elon allowed against FBS Duke was a 12-yard carry, and it was their only rush of 10 yards or more. But when you look at Jamari Taylor, he had 4 of those. He had 4 carries for 10 yards or more. So now I really question what's going to happen in this fourth. What's going to happen on this front? When you think about it, to hold a team to less than 3 yards per carry, specifically Duke. We're talking about an FCS opponent going against an FBS opponent. To hold Duke to less than 3 yards per carry, that means you're getting to the football, multiple people are getting there, and you're tackling. These are, I would say, Alabama State did one half of that. I thought they did get people to the ball, but they did not do a good job tackling. All right, now Jamari Taylor gets the opportunity to continue forcing tackles or forcing missed tackles. This is something that I cannot wait for. This is great competition. And Jamari Taylor has been the engine that led, I don't want to say has been, that feels a little unfair because it's only one game, but Jamari Taylor was the engine that led North Carolina Central offensively over Alabama State. And you're looking at Elon, who had a great job stopping the run against an FBS opponent. Yeah, get your popcorn ready. Now, the next one is a little bit under the radar, but I seen this. My guy Malik from Draft HBCU, shout out to him. He made a note on Twitter, and I thought, oh man, I didn't even catch that. Khalil Baker, the former North Carolina Central Eagle, is now with Elon. And I don't really need to tell Central. I mean, I don't really need to tell you how impactful that Khalil Baker is, but this is Locked on HBCU, and some people just want to check out the show just to check out the show. So maybe not everybody is a North Carolina Central Eagle fan. So let me talk to you, non-Eagle fan. Khalil Baker is a former MEAC Defensive Player of the Year. He's the first ever Aeneas Williams Award winner, which is for the best defensive back in HBCU football. He's an All-American. He is a player who is graded as a top 10 returning safety and the 12th most important transfer in all of FCS football by FCS Football Central. This is a player that is an impact guy, and it's been an impact guy for the duration of his career for North Carolina Central. Now, he has an opportunity in his second game with Elon to be an impact player against North Carolina Central. And just in case you was curious what he did against Duke, he had 10 tackles. So yeah, he's still doing the whole double-digit thing. And he had 2 pass breakups. He's going to fly around the football. He knows the system. But here's the thing. The one who runs the system also knows him. So maybe there's some tendencies that Matt Leone picked up. That's my matchup. Matt Leone versus Khalil Baker. I wonder who wins the matchup between the player who knows the system and the coordinator who knows the player and maybe some of his weaknesses. That will be something that's very interesting. Because if you can exploit some of his weaknesses, you may be able to get him out of position. Maybe you know he's a little bit aggressive on these kind of routes, so I'm going to send those his way. He's still doing that? Cool, got you. Or I know he can set them up, so we're going to run a bunch of out routes or deep outs around there. Boom, out route, deep out route, deep out route. And then we're going to break that tendency on you because we know if you see 5 deep out routes over the course of, 35 minutes, we know in 36 through 50, we can get you with a double move. There's things that Matt Leone knows about Khalil Baker because Khalil Baker was on that team. That's fascinating to me. And then the last one is a kind of a personal one for me. North Carolina Central's wide receivers versus Elon's cornerbacks. When I'm looking at this is, first off, I typically don't do 3 offensive matchups, right? Typically, I don't do that. And when we go to the HBCU versus HBCU times, it'll always be, it's always offense versus defense. But normally I would change who is the priority in the matchup. Sometimes it'd be the quarterback versus the secondary. Sometimes it'd be the secondary versus the quarterback. It'll be a difference in priority. But here, it's all about the offense for North Carolina Central, just because that's what I was looking for. And this one is personal because North Carolina Central didn't really attack the perimeter. You can have a good offense and be limited on the perimeter, but I think that they do have wide receiver talent to be able to attack outside. And I want to hit the boundaries, hit outside the numbers, because I just want to see them expand the width of their offense. Once again, they did a good job on their first half of really attacking the middle of the field, hitting some of the crossers. And I don't mean attack the boundaries with crossing routes that came from the other side of the field. Technically, that would still be doing it, but I mean, it doesn't have to be go routes, but maybe some go routes, some curl routes, some outs, right? Some digs, like just things like that where I didn't really see them attack that often. When they threw to the outside, it was typically behind the line of scrimmage. I was looking at the passing chart, and behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, that was it. It was behind slash out at the line of scrimmage. Those were the only sections, middle or excuse me, short right. Here we go. Short right was the only section outside of the middle that had multiple catches. So, and there's what reasons for that because he only completed 9 passes. So, I think that they got to take that with a grain of salt. All numbers have context involved and attached to them, but I just want to see them attack outside. That's it. You can have a good offense without doing that. You could have a good offense being a run heavy team. You could do that. But for me, Darian Gray, aka the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today Saints Wire, I just want to see them attack the boundaries because that's what I want to see. I understand it's not necessary, but I just want to see it. Am I allowed to do that? I think so. Pushing forward, talk about some storylines. Y'all know I love me some storylines. And for those who are new to the show, because we've gotten a lot of new subscribers since the last football season, you maybe are new to how Game of the Week works. We do our matchup storylines and then key to victory for each team. Typically, when it's two HBCUs, we will. Um, but the storylines are always my favorite because I'm a guy who's big on storytelling. So I love this aspect. Let's get into that and how North Carolina Central is looking to make their money where they typically make their money at as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And now, if you're a small business owner, 86% of small businesses find a qualified candidate within the first 24 hours of putting their job on LinkedIn. So that means that you already know in the few moments that you're there, I can trust that they'll find somebody who is not only there, but also qualified. That's the important part. I don't want to just get you Joe Blow. Let's go ahead and get you this person here who is qualified for your job. Now, if you're on the other side and you're the one looking to be hired, well, this is the only place I would go. Matter of fact, 70% of people, that's 70 out of 100, this is the only place that they go. People don't even go to the other job sites. They go to LinkedIn, they stop, they find the person that they're looking for, they apply, and boom, they get hired. So I go ahead and break the statistics. Don't cheat the analytics now. You just go ahead and go to LinkedIn.com/locked on. Whether you're a small business owner, you can post your job for free, or go to LinkedIn.com/locked on and find the next job expeditiously. So go to LinkedIn.com. That is LinkedIn.com/locked on college. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football. Michigan, Texas, it's tomorrow. If you're not checking out Locked On College Football, check out my guy, Jonathan Davis, out there at Locked On Longhorns. That's my guy. He's doing great work. So make sure you check out those shows as we prepare for the biggest game of the FBS schedule on Saturday. It's tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. But listen, let's get into these storylines for this game because this is where North Carolina Central really makes their money. When you think about what has made Central a great program over the last 2 seasons specifically, you may point to a Celebration Bowl, but prior to that, they were a top 25 team because they were able to play and defeat a high-level competition in the FCS. Their out-of-conference scheduling is the thing that I personally feel like sets them apart from everyone else. This is what they do, and they achieve success on this level as well. It's not as if they're just scheduling and getting beat down. And no, North Carolina Central is scheduling these FCS opponents, and I'm speaking over the last 2 years specifically, and they're defeating them, and they're moving up the rankings because of it. It's the reason that they were able to make it into the FCS playoffs a year ago, despite not winning the MEAC. This doesn't happen to everybody. Your out of conference schedule has to be something for you to be able to achieve it, right? So we talk all about this, and it's earned them a certain reputation, but that was the old team. It earns them a certain reputation, but that was the old team. That was Davius Richard and company. Now it's Walker Harris and company, or maybe it's Jamari Taylor and company. But either way, it was the Richard Collier time at the running back quarterback position. Now it's Harris and it's Taylor. You have to reprove that. I think that every little bit of that reputation that you earned is kind of gone, like on like a mental level, not actually, but if you're on an internal level, I should say, not externally. Externally, I think that North Carolina Central as a program, their body of work, they have proof of concept. I think everybody trusts and looks at them a certain kind of way. But internally, you got to understand that that's not your work. That's not your work. This is a different core than we've seen over the last 2 seasons. But when you look at 2022, knocked off number 25 New Hampshire. That's 25th in the nation. Then they lost to Campbell. They come back the next year. I think that Campbell thing really made them mad. They knocked off Campbell in 2023, and then they knocked off number 25 ranked at the time, Elon. So they went 1-2, or excuse me, 1-1 in 2022, and then they went 2-0 in 2023 against this high-level FCS competition. These are the games that I'm looking at when I'm saying this is what makes Central special. If you ever want to go out and talk to your friends who aren't in the HBCU sphere and you're talking about Central, this is what you mention. Oh, they beat top 25 teams in the country the last 2 years, right? This is what makes them special. But now it has to be this team's turn to prove that they have that badge. You got to earn that badge now. See, Davius Richard had that badge. Walker Harris doesn't. Mookie Collier had that badge. To a lesser extent, Jamari Taylor doesn't, because running backs still play. It's a little different than quarterback. Trey Oliver still has that badge, which is the reason we trust him to be able to do it. But that holdover reputation isn't there. I'm looking at it, man. I'm looking at this year. It's Elon and Campbell again. Just like last year, it was Elon and Campbell. I think Campbell came first last time. This time, Campbell comes last. But there are some tendencies, there's some tendencies that you can point to because you played those teams a year ago. But, they change. Teams change. And this is week 2. They played Duke last week. I don't know how much I don't know how much you're taking from the film. It depends. But I don't know how much you're taking from that film. Now, the other segment, or excuse me, the other storyline to look at is how does North Carolina Central follow up a strong opener versus Bama State? Because I don't know if this has the same intensity for a guy like Trey Oliver. I would assume it does, or assume it's close. But I don't know if it does. I think it's very close, but maybe like 100th of a second. If we're talking about racing, 100th of a second lower. Maybe even 1,000th of a second. Like, that's how close it is. But I do think showing MEAC supremacy over the SWAC means a little bit more. That's my guess. But both of these are very important matchups. I just wonder if you're going to see that same hit you in the face mentality, because they were very physical with Alabama State. They were dominating physically, and it was the smoothest domination I've seen in a long time, because the offensive line was just, I think it was smooth because it was under the radar, because everybody talks about the Andrew Body situation walking out of Alabama State. Also, I think they're focusing a little too hard on Eddie Robinson. I do. That's neither here nor there, but I just want to say this real quick because I did talk about Andrew Body's injury in yesterday's episode. I do feel like people are going a tad bit too hard on Eddie Robinson's character. I agree he didn't make the right decision to put in Andrew Body. I agree that he didn't make the right decision on how to use Body. And I gotta admit that I contribute to it because I did mention something about him misleading, but I don't think it's as simple as I'm telling you this to get you through the door, and now we're gonna pull a fast one on you. Okay, I don't think that that's what the deal is, but I think people going a little too hard on Eddie Rob for that one. But neither here nor there now. But I had to get that off because I was just thinking about it before I was recording, and I didn't know if I was going to say it or not. I will probably regurgitate this next week because we are going to talk about Alabama State. Anyway, Let's focus on the game of the week right now. They smashed Alabama State in the mouth. They really did. North Carolina Central dominated that game in the trenches. I thought that they were overly physical. From everything I hear, there was a mindset difference. The way they talk was different. The energy, they went out there to punch you in the mouth and prove a point. I am king. That's what I think. It was number one versus number one. It was MEAC versus SWAC. It was a point. And even Trey Oliver said, hey, this may end up being a matchup we see later on down the road. So people think in that building that this was a possible, I don't know if they still feel that way because it was such a domination on their part physically. This could have been a game that we saw in Atlanta at the Celebration Bowl. We got to prove a point. I hope they bring that same energy here. That's how I want them to follow up, because when you're looking at a guy like Davius Richard, he's gone. Elon lost to them last year. Not only are they coming for blood, they probably smell blood with the absence of your quarterback. I can't wait to watch this game. Oh my gosh. As we push forward, what does Central need to do in order to come down with the victory is one thing. It is one thing, and it's play complementary football. It sounds simple because I saw it, but I also saw them not do it. So let's break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the place for all your ticketing needs. Matter of fact, I'm looking for some Saints tickets on Gametime as we speak. I was just speaking to my dad about possibly going to a Saints versus Buccaneers game in October. We're looking on Gametime. He ain't asked me, hey, where's that? He said, Gametime. Well, that's where we're going. Now, if you're new to Gametime, you can use the code Locked On College, and you'll be able to get $20 off your first purchase. That's beautiful. Right? If you're not new to Gametime, I'm glad that you stuck around, because they allow you to see your seats before you even purchase, so you can see the view of the field, of the court, of the theater, of the stage, because you have football, basketball, comedy shows, you have theater plays, you have concerts, everything. It's not just one faceted. It's a lot of different places that you can go using Gametime. Matter of fact, if you're in a new area, just how about you look up, hey, what's going on tonight on Gametime? Boom, I decided to go. Let's go ahead and buy these, because you can get them up to an hour after the start of the event. So, seems like a pretty simple decision to me. You go ahead, download the Gametime app if you haven't already. Use the code Locked On College, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. And afterwards, you'll never leave again. Go to Gametime and download the app today. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We have our key to victory for North Carolina Central, and it's very clear. I need them to play complementary football. I thought that the Eagles consistently ran the football throughout that game. Thought Jamari Taylor did a great job, which is why he ended up being our MVP, of course. Alabama State didn't really have too much of an answer for that. I think it was really the lack of tackling that led to them not really having an answer for that, because if they tackled more, this is a different game. Like I genuinely think that there's 2 things that changed that game for Alabama State. It was the lack of tackling and the wrong quarterback being in. You switch that, it's a much closer game at least. But yeah, they had a very strong game running. They had a very strong first half passing. But in the second half, it got ugly. It's crazy because Walker Harris started 7 for 7, and he ended up with 9 for 18. He even went on a 1 for 6 stretch in the second half. He only completed one pass in the second half, and that pass just so happened to be a touchdown. It's funny because you needed to have that play, and it was a really good play. I thought it was a really good look to spot Jamari Taylor in the end zone, because I thought he was going to run, and I don't think he was going to get the first down. But instead, he finds Jamari Taylor for the TD. So that was definitely something that was a little bit more impressive to me. But you made that play when you had to. One can say that's pressure, but I can't highlight it too much, because it was still the only completion of the half on 6 attempts. It wasn't a lot of attempts, but it was still only one. So yeah, I gotta limit how much I praise that. But you're gonna have to pass the ball. Elon did a good job stopping Duke from running. I don't know if Taylor goes for 130 again. I don't know if he goes for 2 touchdowns again. Maybe he can get the touchdowns because proximity, but I don't know if you're just gonna be able to rely on them to carry your offense to victory. I don't know if you can rely on Juan Velarde to have 2 punts inside the 5, 3 inside the 20. I don't know if you can rely on the defense having a pick six and really being dominant and physically beating up Alabama State, or excuse me, Elon in this case. I don't know if you can count on all of those things happening in the same game again, especially not this week. I don't know. You're gonna have to pass the ball. I don't know if you can just be carried. You're gonna have to pass the ball. So that's something to really think about. But that's our key. That's our key, man. Elon stuff to run. You may have to pass to win this game, and last week's performance won't be enough. You got to step it up. So I'm putting a lot of eyes on Walker Harris. I decided to hold off speaking on him too much because I knew that he was our key, and I didn't want to double up a lot for you, man. But I really enjoyed this. One other thing I wanted to say is yesterday, because of the whole body situation, I lost my last segment, right? So I didn't get to give you the extra games that I wanted to watch. Alabama State versus Miles is definitely big. It's going to be one of the freshmen starting now. So that's something to watch. And I think we'll update what the Alabama State championship window looks like on next week. And the other game that I really wanted to highlight, and I spent the most time on yesterday before it got cut, was North Dakota State versus Tennessee State. So allow me to just do that ever so briefly. Just like Central, Eddie George has Tennessee State playing high competition at the start of every year. They played Notre Dame last year. They played Eastern Washington, the number 12 team in the nation, a year ago. Right? Like, these are big time matchups that you're watching them play. And the only difference is that now it's in week 2. So you're looking at an FBS game, which is a little bit different when it comes to Notre Dame. But North Dakota State and then also Eastern Washington, the reason that they schedule these games is to see, okay, what do I need to do to improve? Where do I need to improve? I think there's value there. I understand that North Dakota State should be the big time favorite. I understand that North Dakota State is one of the biggest dogs in FCS football, but you're looking for evaluation purposes. I'm not necessarily looking at the score. Yes, I am. I'm not only looking at the score. I'm looking at a couple of other things. But overall, this is a game that I really want to watch. It's number 3. Tennessee State versus North Dakota State is number 3, and I love it because it's intentional. Some people schedule out of conference games all willy-nilly, but this right here is intentional. And it feels like I'm scheduling these games with the purpose of evaluating my team and understanding where I need to add to and what I need to do in order to get closer to that bar. Not just can we win, not just can we compete, not just can we make a little bit of bread. So there we go. We're going to close out with that. But our game of the week, not to get confused, is Elon versus North Carolina Central. We have our 3 keys to, or excuse me, our key to victory, our 2 storylines to watch, and then our 3 matchups to watch. That comes out on Saturday. It's game time, baby. So until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.